Scott Franklin has over 20 years' experience in organizational design, change management, and delivering sustainable improvements. Scott is a well respected authority on organizational change, specializing in leadership responsibilities of change management. Scott also brings specific expertise in the areas of creating a combined learning organization in parallel with a strengths based organization while simultaneously creating a culture of execution. We are delighted that Scott joins us today to talk about his article, Hey Ref, Can We Have the Ball Back? He will discuss the roles of leaders, supervisors, and managers in organizational change and its critical enabler, organizational problem solving. Without further ado, here is Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott Franklin, and today's WebEx is focused on developing the learning organization, and specifically the critical organizational skill of organizational problem solving and your role as leaders in developing this skill. This is especially important in today's environment due to the rapid rate of change both around and within your organization. We go back to Darwin. He referred to survival of the fittest, but what he actually said was that it is not the strongest species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. The world around us is rapidly changing, and this brings both challenges and opportunities. These challenges and opportunities create new problems, and your organization's ability to rapidly solve problems greatly increases its ability to adapt to change. And over the past few years, I've seen a large number of organizations that appear to have what I see as a fundamental learning disability on how to improve their organizational problem-solving skills. And I had a revelation a couple of years ago at a high school football game on what the source of this problem was. I had a friend that I grew up with, and he loved football, played football all through grade school, through high school, through college. And he wasn't able to go pro, but he still loved the game. And in order to stay involved, he decided he'd like to referee games. So he became a high school football referee. Well, on one of his first games, the ball carrier comes running by him and gets hit, and the ball pops out, and there's a fumble. Well, the years of training that my friend had been through on what to do with the fumble kicked in, and he dives on the ball and recovers the fumble. Well, being the ref, that wasn't exactly the job he was supposed to be doing, but his training had kicked in, that's what he did, and the coach from the other team yells across the field, "Hey, ref, can we have the ball back?" It was embarrassing, but also very funny. But what it pointed out to me was that that my friend's role had changed in the game, but his training for so long had trained him to act in a certain way that was difficult for him to give that up, especially in the heat of the moment. If we take a look at leaders in our organization, we're going to find that one of the problems they have in leading organizational change and increasing problem-solving skills is the background that our organizations come from and how these leaders were trained. If we take a look at the very beginning, back we had the craftsperson in the early days. And I think back as a craftsperson, I imagine the Cremona violin makers, Stradivari, Gogli, where they would go into a workshop and they'd make the violins, craft the instrument, and the demand increased, so they need to increase their production output. Well, the way to do that is you add more people. And then they started realizing that they could be more efficient by a natural division of labor. So you started adding in, changing the jobs and the roles of each individual. And one person would select the wood, one person would carve the wood, one person would assemble the violin, one person would string it up, tune it, and prepare it for delivery. But those were still craftsmen. They were more specialized, but they were craftsmen. Well, as this evolved, we got into the mass production techniques, and we had an organizational layer to coordinate these different roles. And what was happening over time was the roles were becoming more and more specialized, and there was automation coming in at the same time. And what was happening was the actual craftsmanship that was involved was being designed out of the role. So now the individual was no longer a craftsman, he was just an assembler, and his intellectual engagement in the operation became less and less critical. In fact, it came to the point that it really tried to design out the intellectual engagement. Henry Ford had the idea of defining jobs to the point that a person could be trained to do any job on the assembly line in under a day. And that really kind of started the creation of the unskilled, unengaged workforce. And with the intellectual capacity of the individual, it doesn't like to be unused. So it got used in different ways, which were generally a problem to the organization. And in fact, it even expanded beyond that to where we created functional organizations, functional silos. And for example, here you take a look. Maybe we have operations on the left. That middle one would be maintenance. To the right is procurement. And you created these optimized functional organizations, but they weren't really designed for the optimization of the manufacturing process, the development process. And the danger of this is it creates a culture of dependency, that the line worker is less and less intellectually engaged in the daily operations. This old model really had it was called a command and control model. Remember, it started with the craftsman, went to multiple craftsmen, but then we started with the division of labor, which wasn't necessarily wrong or bad until it started really getting the functional silos and managing by metrics. We started seeing some of the negative effects of this command and control model coming into play. The results, if taken to the extreme, are you get tremendous process fragmentation and this culture of dependency where the worker is, it's actually also called learned helplessness, where the worker is told, don't think, just do, which creates very little day-to-day enjoyment of the job, and realizing that the organizations that are designed like that are tending to struggle. The new organizational design is really the inverted pyramid, where we're bringing in or focusing on the front line, the process, the development, the manufacturing side, and the whole organization is optimized around the line worker, making sure they have the tools necessary, and we get rid of the sub-optimization that happens over the functional divisions, and we focus on the process of manufacturing. And the idea here is that we can also reinsert the intellectual engagement of the employee, but it's not so much in designing their work, but in designing the problems and solving the problems that come out. And as problems, the line workers are the closest to the problem. They're going to be the most knowledgeable on what the source of the problem is and how to best fix it. And since they're also probably going to be the ones that have to execute the new process, their engagement in designing it gives them much more buy-in into executing it correctly and fine-tuning it. What we see is the new inverted pyramid has, we call it the inverted pyramid. We also call it the empowered employee. And a lot of organizations are trying to get there, but they're empowering the employee without the sufficient training to make them truly effective. And this, decisions move to the front line, because now the worker who's closest to the problem can decide what the best way to fix the problems are. The job's broadened because we've started breaking down these organizational or functional silos. And so purchasing can look over at operations, can look over at engineering, and allow them to work together based on what's best for the organization, not what's best for their function. The leader's job starts changing here, and this is really the core of the point of the WebEx today, is the leaders now function as coach, mentors, and teachers, and much less as directors. And this creates a culture of continuous improvement. Within your organization, just to get a feel for the audience, where do you place your organization? Would it be an engaged employee organization, mostly engaged employee organization, maybe a mixed model, mostly command and control, or a hard command and control organization? We're going to open a poll right now to just put in where you think your organization best fits. So we can see that we're starting to get some responses to the organization, to this poll. And what we're seeing is, over time, the organizations are trying to make that transition. And we can see here, okay, we've got, there we go. We've got the responses. And what we see is actually, which is interesting, because I think about 10, 20 years ago, the results would have been significantly different. Nobody responded that they're in a heavy command and control organization. Most organizations have evolved completely out of that. We do see about a quarter of the organizations still feel they're mostly command and control. We've got 11% at the top that are feel they're actively engaged employee organizations, that inverted pyramid. 17% mostly engaged employee organization. And clearly the majority, almost half, 42% of the respondees show that they're in a mixed model. And I'm sure you're feeling your organization is moving away from command and control and more towards the engaged employee. This transition, what I'm saying, is in this transition, there's some issues that are making it more difficult to execute rapidly. The first one is, in times of stress, people and organizations tend to make the safe decision. So if you have a background in command and control and you're moving more towards the engaged employee, when problems arise, when things get difficult, it's easy to go to the safe zone of the leaders taking over and making the decisions for the organization and actually pulling back the employee engagement and taking the decisions on themselves. Next one is leadership, as we discussed, has more experience in command and control structure. That's where they grew up. A lot of organizations have their foundation. There's very few organizations that have really designed themselves from scratch as an engaged employee organization. The two that come to mind are Nucor Steel and Toyota, the Toyota company. They started off with the design of being a truly inverted pyramid. What we're seeing a lot of times is progress towards the engaged employee model, but in times of stress, we regress back to some command and control behavior. And the last one is, the real transition challenge is the leadership must be taught the new structure and taught to trust the new structure. It's easy to use it when there's nothing on the line, but when you're behind on sales or the economy takes a dip as it moves as it has, it's much easier to go back to the command and control organization. But the problem is you've worked with trying to get the employees engaged, and now you've ended up taking that away from them. You've got them started down the path and jerked back, and sometimes it's hard to get them moving back down that path when you shift back to heading towards the engaged employee or the inverted pyramid. We just do a review of the learning organization. There's really 5 fundamental characteristics of the learning organization. The first one starts off with personal mastery, and that usually shows up in the leadership being able to set their egos aside and set their training aside and place the goals of the organization and individuals ahead of their own personal goals. They still need to meet their personal goals, but they do that after they've met the organization goals. The next one is mental models, or we call that paradigms, and it's the reality that we create based on our assumptions, our perception, our experience, our background, our beliefs, and we create these mental models, and they really are what create reality for us. And we believe things happen a certain way based on our past experience. These mental models, through times of change, these mental models also need to change, because what was true a year ago is no longer true. If we hold on to those same assumptions now, we won't be able to adapt as much. And in fact, if anybody's ever worked with somebody who says, "Don't tell me the facts, my mind's made up," you know you're dealing with a very obvious mental model. The next characteristic of a learning organization is the shared vision. If you're moving towards something, make sure the entire organization understands where you're headed so they can make day-to-day decisions that move you closer to the vision. And one of the fundamental failures of leadership is the inability to turn a personal vision into an organizational shared vision. Then we get to team learning, which is really the focus of today's WebEx, and that is the ability to turn individual learning into a shared learning or a team learning. And the idea is that if you've got 10 plants and you have a problem at one of them that is similar to the problems in the 9 other plants, in a learning organization or good team learning, you solve that problem once and share the solution 10 times. In a poor organization that does not execute team learning well, you really leave all 10 plants to solve that problem individually. So you've got 1/10 the organizational problem-solving capacity. The last one is systems thinking, and that's the understanding that there's no such thing as cause and effect. It's always cause and effects. There's always multiple effects, and the additional effects are usually unintended, and they can be either positive or negative. But in general, a lot of times we see the unintended consequences tend to be more on the negative side. Systems thinking is where you stand back and take the whole system into account and realize that a change in one part of the organization can and will affect changes in the other organization. But the one we're most focused on in this WebEx is the team learning, the organizational learning, and primarily the problem-solving skills. And the idea that in the old command and control architecture, the paradigm, the mental model was, the belief was that the leader owns the problem. So the organization pushes these problems up through the organization, identifies them, sends them to the supervisor, to the manager, to the leader, and they tend to get solved at a higher level than necessary. In the new organization, the inverted pyramid, all the leader does, he owns the process, the problem-solving process, and works hard to make that the organization can solve the problems. But they tend not to solve them. In fact, they work very hard not to be the person who solves the problems. Wants to push that back into the organization. In the old model, the leader would spend time on gathering information. I'm sure you've been in situations where the leader asks you, send me more information, give me a report, show me the raw data, show me why this is happening, and spending a lot of time getting information on the problem. In the new model, really the time is spent on developing the employees, and that's a difficult one to do because you have problems today. And if you don't have the employees and the organization developed, trained, and trusted to handle these problems, kind of in a difficult situation because you don't have the organization ready to handle them, and you've still got to handle them. So you've got a dual job there of trying to change the organization and develop the employees. In the old model, the focus was on the quality of the solution, taking a look and making sure that we got the best solution possible. And now it's focused on a quality of the implementation. And this goes back to the principle that a B solution with an A execution will generally outperform an A solution with a B execution. So as the leader now doesn't spend as much time focused on the quality of the solution, but spends most of the time on the quality of the implementation, you'll find over time that actually the quality of the solution will evolve as the implementation. If you execute flawlessly and realize there were some shortcomings, you can actually improve the quality of the solution at the same time. In the old model, we held the employees responsible for the actions, give them direction, and expect them to carry out and check how well they carried it out. In the new model, we're really trying to push the responsibility for the outcome to the employees, and less on how they solved it, and more importantly on how it was solved, or if it was solved effectively. Here's a throwback to the old days. I'm sure everybody's been through an organization that went through the suggestion box phase, and that really showed the problem with the old model. The suggestion box, occasionally we get good suggestions, but oftentimes turned into just a complaint center. So any disgruntled employee would stuff their problem into the suggestion box, and expecting the leaders to handle it. And what would happen is over time, the leadership would just get overwhelmed with all these suggestions. A lot of times they were anonymous, and very rarely was a solution provided. It was just throwing in the problems. So the leaders would start dreading opening the box and looking in because it felt like they had to provide some sort of response to the suggestions, but it ended up that it was really not an efficient use of time or effective use of time. So the suggestion box would last maybe 6 months and then get removed. In the new model, we're teaching the employees how to do problem-solving methodologies. And here's one, if you haven't heard of this before, you will probably within the next year. It's called an A3. It's a tool developed by Toyota, and the term A3 simply comes from a paper size in Europe and in the Far East, in Asia, Europe and Asia. Their largest paper size is an A3. Our largest paper size is the tabloid, or 11 by 17. And this Toyota developed this, and the intent was that you get your analysis and the full problem on a single sheet of paper. If it can't fit on a single sheet of paper, you keep working with the problem until you can get it identified and a solution provided on a single sheet. It just started with the principle, the idea that no one really has the time to look through 100 pages of data, and the idea is that the intent is not to push data and problems up, but to push solutions up. So bring the solution to a single page of paper. An A3 in general looks like, and there's a lot of different formats for an A3. There's no one format, and in fact, the value of the A3 is not in the format. It is in how it's developed, who develops it, and what's done with it after it's developed. But there's basically, in this example, 6 different sections. On the top left, you see the problem statement. So make sure the problem is clearly identified so you know what you're fighting. Immediately under the problem statement is the current state. So I clearly identify what the current state is. Under that is the future state. So you can identify, where you are and clearly identify where you want to get. The top right, you have the target. And that's the how do you measure the progress and how can you measure the target when you finally achieve it. Next is the plan. How are we going to get there? And the last is the specific actions. It can also include progress tracking. But the idea is that this entire A3 is created by the employee, and they're taught how to do this. So now when the leader gets this, they have the problem statement clearly identified, a plan of action, and they have a target state identified. And this is all developed by the employees. So now in the old model, the leader would evaluate the options. Should we do A? Should we do B? Should we do C? How's the best way to solve this problem? In the new state, all you're evaluating is the method and risk. So when you look at an A3, did you follow the method? Did you clearly identify the problems? Did you do 5 whys? There's other methods that we use for the problem solving, other tools, the CDAC, the cause and effects diagram with the addition of cards, or fishbone diagrams, root cause analysis, value stream mapping, flow charting. Have we taught our employees how to do those and provide us with the problem identified and a potential solution put together? Now we can work as a leader. We can work on was the method properly followed? Did you use the right tools? Did you truly get to the root cause of the problem and make sure we're not just fighting symptoms? And then take a look: is there any risk involved in trying this? If the risk is low and it looks like a adequate solution, then the leader supports the execution of that problem solving, of that solution. And the idea is, if you give a man a fish, you have fed him for today. So if your employees bring you problems and you solve that problem, you've solved one problem for that day. If you teach a man to fish, you have fed him for a lifetime. If your organization, as a leader, if you teach your organization how to solve problems and they bring solutions to you, and you help them work with the organization, work with the people in the organization to execute those solutions, you're basically teaching the organization to fish. So that concludes the WebEx. If you have any questions or any additional comments, I'd like to get in touch with us. Like I said, this was the Darwin, the referee, and learning to fish. And it had to do with organizational problem solving. And what I'm saying is organizations are trying to get there, but they're stumbling a little bit. And the biggest stumbling block is the leaders don't fully internalize the fact that their job is now to teach the organization how to solve problems and get out of the problem-solving business. That's just like my friend, and when he became a referee, his role in the game changed. He was no longer a ball carrier, no longer part of the game. He just made sure the game was carried out properly. And leaders today, and when it comes to problem solving, your job is to stay out of the game, just make sure the game's getting played properly. So thank you for joining us today. Here's some resource information. If you're interested in a copy of this presentation, just send an email to education@lce.com. Thank you.